Hello everybody, welcome. We are going to be talking about the new balance change. People have been asking me about this. Obviously, about 3 weeks ago, they announced this post. See, it says September 11. And yet I'm only talking about it now because I was traveling. I was at WCS Montreal was when they announced this. And then I was on a little vacation. And then I was coming back and actually playing with the balance change and testing it out and getting a feel. I haven't tested everything, and they've since released a few more changes, but let's just quickly go through, read the changes, and I'll give you guys my thoughts, because people keep asking me, and I keep saying I'll do a video. Haven't done it yet, so finally we're here. Let's go. Starting off with the big Terran Changes. And basically, random delay between shots for its attack, both anti-air and anti-surface, air to surface. So basically, it's anti-air and anti-ground attack has removed random delay. Now, what does that mean? Apparently, there's a random delay between the shots firing. And by removing this, the battlecruiser effectively gets a 20%, I think it's like 18% was the exact number the balance team said, damage increase. That's a lot of damage. However, the anti-air is reduced by 1 damage point. So the anti-air attack will stay roughly the same. Okay? But the anti-ground gets an 18% damage increase, plus it can now move while shooting. So, I mean, obviously, the main problem before is look how stupid it looked before. If it was kited by Stalkers, Queens, fucking pretty much any unit, it would just do this awkward stop and start thing up here at the top. It looked like shit. Now it can keep moving. Even if they perfectly stutter step like this, you're pretty much hitting them almost non-stop. It means you can, when the drones are running away, you can keep firing and all sorts of shit. It's incredible. Makes a big difference, okay? Excuse me. So that's really nice. Essentially, the battlecruiser is going to be way more effective in terms of its raw damage output versus ground, especially when your opponent's microing around. Yamato cannon damage, though, has been reduced from 300 to 240, so it doesn't quite kill a Void Ray or an Archon anymore. Archon has quite a few shields left afterwards. Void Ray doesn't quite die, just survives with a little bit of life left. So Yamato Cannon's a little bit smaller, which I'm fine with. It's still significant damage, and I believe that's the Brood War value of the damage as well. So that's kind of cool. Overall, the battlecruiser is going to be a lot more effective against Zerg. Against Protoss, it's still going to struggle because Stalkers and Tempests are great, especially the new Tempests, which we'll get to, which are amazing. Widow Mine. So Drilling Claws upgrade now permanently cloaks the Widow Mine while burrowed. So at the moment, the way the Widow Mine works, for anyone who hasn't been following the evolution of StarCraft over the years, after a Widow Mine fires, it becomes visible, even if it's burrowed, until it recharges and then it goes invisible again. Once you get the Drilling Claws upgrade, it now stays permanently cloaked. This is still a really inaccessible upgrade. You need a factory with a tech lab to upgrade it, and you need an armory. So this is kind of like an upgrade which naturally squeezes into late game Terran versus Zerg, the later stages of the mid game. If they're playing Lingbane Muta, you can very easily get this. But against Protoss, doesn't really squeeze into builds very well. There will no doubt be some weird Drilling Claws openings that come out, but they're always going to be a bit of a gamble. They're not going to be a solid opening because you have to invest so much to get that Drilling Claws upgrade. It's very expensive. So that's cool. Makes the Widow Mines a bit more useful. You need to actually have detection once Drilling Claws is up. That can also punish some players who are just skipping detection entirely in Protoss vs Terran. You keep dropping these Widow Mines in. If they've only got a few oracles for detection, they get punished. Or if they play like a Blink DT build like me, they can get super punished. Next up, Cyclone's armor goes down from 1 to 0. That means the Cyclones are going to kill each other super fast. They already killed each other pretty fast, even faster now. More importantly, Workers, Marines, Zealots, all these basic units, but especially things like Marines, Zealots, Zerglings are all going to kill Cyclones really significantly quicker now. It's a pretty big change. I'm a little bit sad for that against Protoss and Zerg because I feel like the Cyclone, while a good unit against those races, already struggled against Workers and against Zerglings coming in and all that sort of stuff. So this is a change, I think, which is, it's trying to move the Cyclone away from being the most dominant thing in TVT. I don't know if it's really going to address that. My thought is you're kind of going to just weaken them against Protoss and Zerg here, and they're still going to be very similarly as good in TVT. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I always have a very much sit back and see how it affects it. It's not like it's the craziest change. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they're halving the hit points or anything, but it's significant. Next up, the Thor the anti-air weapon speed when you've got it in single fire mode. So that's the 250mm Punisher cannons. That's where you go single fire. It brings its big guns off its back and starts shooting things against broodlords, carriers, those sort of things. Way better than the shitty. The splash damage is much better against light units. That's the Javelin missile launchers, which, by the way, they are decreasing the area of effect of those Javelin missile launchers. They got buffed previously. That's the splash of the anti-air, and it was fucking mutas up really hard. So they're reverting that back to a lower splash radius. They're also getting rid of the extra armor point that the Thor got. The Thor went from 1 to 2 armor about a year ago, and Zerglings mutas just struggle to kill them really hard. Their armor is just incredible against Zerg. So what they're doing by making this change is they're trying to make Lingbane muta more viable against Zerg so that Thors don't shut it down quite as hard. Likewise, the anti-air attack is going to make them way better against Broodlords. They're going to be kind of shit. They're still shit versus carriers, because carriers, if they're microed correctly, can always stay out of range of the Thors. They can shoot the interceptors and then pull back. And they can stay at the perfect distance where the interceptors keep attacking and the Thors are just like, hey, let me attack you. They'll just waddle forward. They won't get anything done if you micro, properly. So at high levels of play. Up to Diamond, maybe even Masters, you're probably going to get quite a few players you don't realize how that micro works. Maybe you can still counter it with mass Thors against mass carriers, but bit of a gamble. They also get 35 plus 15 armored to just 40 plus 10 versus massive. So they're going to do a little bit less damage to Corruptors, 40 rather than 50. So they're not going to be as good against Corruptors, Vikings, all those sort of units. Are Liberators armored? Does anyone know? Are Liberators armored units? If you guys could let me know. I have no idea if they were or weren't. But it's going to be better against Broodlords, BCs, Tempests. Next up, guys, Medevac. They did this weird change on the Medevac boost, where basically the cooldown is much less, but it doesn't increase the duration anymore. This is the Medevac upgrade. It makes the boost like marginally better. It's negligible. I don't know. The main thing here is Medevac heal now works on units under the effects of Phoenix Graviton Beam. So when a Phoenix lifted a units, before Medevacs wouldn't heal them. Likewise, shield batteries wouldn't heal them. They're changing that. So this is going to weaken Phoenix Harass a little bit. Not so important with the Medevacs, much more important in Protoss versus Protoss with the shields, and we'll get to that. Hyperflight Rotors is getting slightly cheaper. Still a very niche upgrade. They're just trying to make it a little bit less inaccessible, make it a little bit more accessible is probably the smart way to say that. There's still going to be a few Speed Banshee mech builds as well as transitions, but it's not a drastic change. Quality of life change, we could probably call this. Doesn't really affect the cost much. Anti-armor missile is going down to 0 damage. Now, the anti-armor missile already had its damage nerfed from 30 to 15. It was still somewhat meaningful at doing damage to Marines, Zerglings, and Banelings, mostly Marines in Terran versus Terran. This is going to remove that and make it look, it's just there to remove armor. It's not to do damage. And that's good. It's still a very useful spell, but it's a bonus spell. We're still seeing people get 10 Ravens shooting a bunch of missiles and killing 50 Marines once in a while. So it's kind of cool to see that just put into it. It's like, no, this is a support spell. This is not a damage spell. And that's fine. They don't want it used as a damage spell, so I'm totally cool with that. Next up, anti-armor missile will now reduce Protoss shields as well as armor. Hey, look, I can max screen it. It looks more professional because we don't have the whole thing. Woof, smart. Anti-armor missile didn't reduce Protoss shields before. I didn't even know this. Do you guys know how fucking bullshit that was? One game, I always tell this story. I was murdering a guy with this silly Cyclone Raven cheese, and then he finally got to Archon tech, and like just a couple Archons wrecked me, and I didn't understand why, but it turned out their shields, which is 99% of an Archon's life, weren't affected by the anti-armor missile. So while all the other units were having negative armor and my Cyclones were butchering them, these Archons were tanking like crazy. So it's going to be the exact same. Someone's asking how much will it reduce Protoss shields? The exact same. Anti-armor missile does a -3 on armor, and it does go into the negative. So you actually end up getting essentially a +3 upgrade on your Marines or a +3 upgrade on your Cyclones on top of what you've got. That's the effect of the anti-armor missile. And it'll work against everything. Engineering Bay. They've combined Neo Steel Frame and Structure Armor. Oh my god, it's called Neo Steel Armor now. Neo Steel Frame, for you guys who don't know, that's the one which makes the bunker have more space. Does it give it more hit points? Guys in chat, clarify. I don't know. I've made that upgrade like twice in my life. They're just tacking it onto structure armor. Structure armor gives 2 armor to all your buildings. Really useful. It's TVT late game. Makes your planetaries not die to zealots. Marines, Zerglings. Very useful. I'm not sure if Neo Steel Frame gives bunkers extra hit points. People are saying no. Some says yes. Thanks Twitch chat. Wikipedia it for me, guys. Come on. Frozen Flame says no. Okay. It just lets you put 2 more Marines in a bunker. It's a silly upgrade. But hey, it's tacked onto a useful upgrade now. You'll get it in late game. Sweet. Down to the Zerg changes, guys. Zergling and Hydralisk unburrow speed changed to about half. So that means you can pop Zerglings and Hydras up underneath your opponent's units and immediately get into the combat. It opens up the opportunity to set up really cool ambushes. Not something you're gonna be using that often though. They've also reduced the random unburrow delay. So basically, the units are gonna be able to pop up and down. Actually, no, the burrow speed is the same. It's only unburrow that changed, and it's only for Zergling and Hydralisk. So it's just going to allow them to pop up and jump onto enemy units. Pretty rare you're going to use this, but there will be like that one moment 2 years from now in a GSL, someone pulls this off, makes a sick comeback, and we're all like, whoa! So that's what I see this as. It's opening up the opportunity just to do more cool shit with burrow. It's not going to be a big game changer, but, you know, it'll make Zerglings popping up in the back of a mineral line after your opponent thinks they've cleaned them up, killing some SCVs. It'll be a little bit more responsive, which is nice. Now, the Hydralisk gets a health decrease. This has already been reverted, so we'll talk about that more later. Infested Terran cast range has gone up by 1. People aren't using Infested Terrans a lot. They're amazing at killing anti-air units, but people just aren't really ever finding a situation where they can get them underneath the enemy air units, which is why they're trying to just make the Infested Terran a more seen spell. I'm okay with this. We'll see how it goes. Ultralisk, new upgrade added. Anabolic Synthesis. So it costs a bit of money, and it basically gives them a 10% movement speed increase, but only off creep. Very late game upgrade. It's not crazy. And yes, in this GIF, these players don't know how to start a step with their Marauders properly. They're really bad at it. On the plus side, though, how do I... There we go. There's an X. Let me out. Oh, no. Gotta go back. Like, how do I close this? Yeah, it's an 80-second upgrade, 150, 150. Cool quality of life upgrade for super late game Zerg vs Terran, where Ultras are not super useful unless you've already got a lot of momentum. So I think it's cute. Nice little upgrade. Here's a big one, guys. The Nidus Network cost. This has been changed, but we'll talk about it. Basically, the actual exit of the Nidus Worm is going to go from 100, so 100 minerals, 100 gas, to 50 minerals, 50 gas, half the cost. That's big, because you're popping a lot of these exits out, whether you're doing a cheeky butthole build, where you're popping swarm hosts out everywhere and throwing them into their bases and then hopping back in the Nidus to evacuate, or if you're doing something else really cool, which is, well, what else? Popping out lurkers in the back of their main base, just constantly throwing Nidus Worms around the map to kill a base, pop back in and avoid. Most importantly, the Nidus Worm, while emerging, is no longer invincible. Instead, it has 6 armor. Now, the overall cost, going up to 250 gas of the opening of the Nidus Worm, sorry, not the opening, but yeah, the beginning of the Nidus Worm, the structure you actually place in your base, that going up to 250 was a bit big, so they've actually lowered that down again, because they're like, look, this was just too expensive. But notice here, this is the old Nidus Worm. You couldn't even attack it until it popped, and then they could pop out queens and transfuse it and stuff if they were quick enough. Obviously, in this GIF, they didn't bother doing that. But here we see the Nidus Worms, the new one. It can be targeted even while it's burrowing its way out, but it's got 6 hit points. So Marines, Workers, Zealots, low damage units are going to still struggle to kill it really hard, which is a cool change. Now, here's a really tricky one for people like myself who use fancy hotkeys. Burrow and unburrow have actually been separated into 2 separate keys. So basically, what would happen before is when you tab through your units, it would identify burrowed and unburrowed, say, Zerglings or Roaches, as different unit types. Say you've got 10 Zerglings burrowed, 10 Zerglings unburrowed. If you select those, you would have to tab from the burrowed to the unburrowed ones to give them commands. Because they would have the same key, burrow and unburrow, right? But basically what's happened there is they've changed that, and they've said, look, now you can control them all at once, and you can say unburrow while having them all selected, and all the burrowed units will unburrow without affecting the other ones. Or you can say everyone burrow, and all the ones that aren't burrowed will burrow. And this allows you to easier and more organically control your units. But if you're like me and you've built your control group and hotkey system around the old way, it's a little bit frustrating because if they keep this in, I'm going to need to rework my hotkeys and find something. Some key I don't use very much, which there's a couple of, I guess, to use as the new unburrow key. If you look at how many buttons you need for Zerg spellcasters when they're burrowed and unburrowed and stuff, you'll realize what I'm talking about. For you, those of you who use standard hotkeys, this is just a cool quality of life change. It'll be nice and easy. Something they probably should have put in when the game first came out. Protoss Nexus Mass Recall is named to Strategic Recall. Now, let's preface this section, guys. All I'm hearing on Reddit at the moment and in my Twitch chat is people saying pig. Why are Protoss getting nerfed? People on Reddit are saying Blizzard have lost their minds. Protoss is the weakest race right now. That's the general sentiment amongst pros and the community. People saying Protoss is having a little bit of a hard time. They're struggling. Protoss hasn't won any tournaments this year, or very few major tournaments. They've gotten a lot of semis, a lot of finals, but obviously Maru has dominated Korea. Cyril's dominated the WCS. So just because they haven't won many grand finals, I would take with a grain of salt. But let's assume Protoss is a little bit weak. Everyone is complaining. Everyone's saying there's so many Protoss nerfs. And I'm going to go through and argue that a lot of these are buffs. There are some, like the shield battery change. I totally agree. I think it's a bit bad for Protoss, and hopefully they revert it. But check this out. So the Nexus Strategic Recall used to be 6.5. That was like this big, fat fucking ball. It's going down to 2.5, which is, for perspective, that's about the area of a fungal. Now remember, you only need to have the edge on your units and you can recall. What's really cool here is it's going down to about half the cooldown, and you can still recall a friggin' nice chunk of your army. You can recall 6 Immortals and 6 High Templar easily with this. And that's fucking, you just ball them up, recall them, you're going to shut down 20 Roaches and 20 Hydras dropping in your main, right? This gets problematic when you really want to reposition your whole army. Okay? When you want to reposition your whole army, like when a Terran really just somehow slides 4 Liberators and 6 Medevacs into your main and you're way out on the map and you're like, fuck. That's where this is going to fuck you, okay? So if you massively screw up on your positioning, this will be worse. But this means you can recall more often, which is amazing, and you can do it to reposition still relatively sizable chunks of units, especially when we're talking about Protoss units. If you're playing a style and Storm's out, like, you don't need to recall that many units to deal with most things. So this is actually a buff in my mind. Even though I get it, in some situations it'll be worse, usually this is going to be a better spell. So people need to stop calling this a nerf. That's my opinion. I think it's not a nerf outside of those circumstances, which are much easier to mitigate. Much easier. Sentry. This is an amazing change. Hallucination energy cost reduced from 100 to 75. Now that makes it just that much easier to scout with sentries, especially for Protoss versus Protoss, guys. You can get a sentry out with hallucination so quickly now. Whereas before, you'd go Sentry Stalker first, you'd get your hallucination, and their 4 gates already hitting you by the time you scout what's up. And you're like, fuck. And you don't have a lot of time. Like, it doesn't give you a lot to prepare. That's roughly an extra 30 seconds to get that scout on. This is big. It means you can hallucinate more frequently. I use hallucination all the time against Zerg to check where their army is in the mid-game. It's because I don't open up Oracle. Hallucination's a big part of my scouting as a ground opening Protoss versus Zerg player. This is going to help me a lot. They're also making Guardian Shield a little bit bigger. Zealots often charge out in front, and they're not really benefiting from the Guardian Shield. You've kind of got to manually micro your sentry forward in a lot of fights. They're changing that. They're making it just a little bit bigger. Nice little adjustment to make the Guardian Shield a little bit better. That's cool. I like it. I like it a lot. High Templar, they're actually reducing the feedback damage. 1 point of energy drained to 0.5 point of energy drained. Now this means they're not just going to instantly one-shot medevacs. They're not going to instantly one-shot banshees and oracles and things like that. It's still going to make a spellcaster shit by getting rid of all its energy. It's still going to do a lot of damage, but it's not just going to one-shot a full hit point medevac, a high energy medevac or anything like that. And this means in the late game, Terran can still drop a bit more, which is very, very nice. It also, as they point out, means that ghosts ghosts with their new snipe can't really snipe High Templar. It takes too long. But the Templar can still just go zap and kill ghosts. Ghosts have to rely on EMP at the moment, which isn't as deadly. Like you knock a High Templar down in energy, it pulls back, it's fine. So the two situations is drops are going to be able to work a lot better in PvT. If anyone has any other good points, like Vipers going in, if they get zapped, you can pull them back and get more energy and transfuse them. That's big too. That does make a big difference. But yeah, basically, Ghosts will be able to survive. Medevacs can still drop into the late game. Whereas often, what do we see? Main base has 2 cannons, a battery, and a High Templar. It doesn't matter if you send 4 Medevacs in there. It's like really fucking hard to not just get destroyed by a couple of cannons and a High Templar in late game. And that's one of the big frustrations that Terran players have, because their mobility is one of their big tools. And when PvT gets past a certain point, they struggle against that. So it's definitely a thing which I think will help just kind of make a spell still useful, but not quite as drastic. And I don't mind that with something like Feedback, which could just snap way too many things, especially the ability to just snap transports. Like, you can't do that to a Prism. You can't do that to an Overlord. There's no spell that just goes zap. And for a 2-supply unit, you kill 4 full transports. So I think that being changed is very cool. Very cool. Robotics Facility is going to be cheaper. Florencio and Turkey Dano are fucking running around in circles cheering. They're like, oh, cool. The robos I'm building in my opponent's naturals are going to be even cheaper. It's only 50 minerals. It's not the biggest change. We'll see how it goes. It's 50 minerals. Yeah, I haven't really like figured out this change too much. They've said, look, ideally it'll reduce the strain on Robotics Facility unit build time. Currently, the cost and position of the Protoss tech tree makes it tricky to afford 2 of them early on, and that's an issue. 4 units can it produce are all very important Protoss mid-game strategies. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, 50 minerals is not going to change everything, but I do a lot of cheesy robo builds. So, the teabag is going to get stronger, mother truckers. That'll be cool. Colossus added turret tracking. Let's go back a second, by the way. This is a buff. Feedback. This is a nerf of a pretty niche ability, right? It's not like Feedback not instantly killing shit is going to make you lose. How many games do you Feedback shit in? Anyone who's complaining about Feedback getting nerfed, like, no. Hallucinations getting buffed. Guardian Shield's getting buffed. This is getting buffed. Sorry, where are all these Protoss nerfs people are crying about? Sorry, excuse me, where are they? Oh, are we just a hive mind who one person says a thing and we want to just take it at face value rather than critically reading through the notes? I do that too, guys. Don't worry, I'm just as guilty of it as you guys are. So what we're looking at now is another buff. Basically, watch the head of the Colossi. What you're watching on this top one is how whenever you tell it to run away, it has to point its head in the direction it's walking. But what they did is they actually gave the Colossus new confidence. It's got a camera. It's got a rear view camera. So it can back up while looking the other way, which means whenever you tell it to attack, it doesn't have to stop, rotate its head, and then shoot. So you can see it doesn't have to move its head. It can move and shoot stutter step a lot more smoother. This is really good against Terran. Helps a bit against Zerg as well, but it's very good against Terran because there's a lot of fights with Stalker Sentry Colossi where your sentries run out of energy and you're backing off and the Terran's trying to collapse on you and get on those Colossi, and getting a few more swipes in can make the world of difference. A world of difference. So that's a buff. Next up, we have the Disruptor, which is going back to its previous state. Something which is not mentioned here. That means, by the way, guys, Purification Nova isn't just going to hit a unit and detonate. It will only detonate after the full 2 seconds is up. So you can micro that right into the juicy center and M-canning the fuck out of your opponent's army. This is huge. It's not necessarily better, don't get me wrong, but it's a huge change to the unit. They're going back to the old design from over a year ago. And this, people are saying Disruptor nerf. Against Terran, arguably this is a nerf, but you can still use them against Terran. And this one is way better against Zerg and way better against Protoss. Against Terran, you could definitely say this is a nerf just because of the way it works. But against Protoss and Zerg, it is 110% a better unit. Canning called it a nerf today. He was right in one of the matchups. Against Terran, it's a small nerf. It changes the role of that unit. We're not going to see mass disruptors as much. We can still see some disruptors, especially the old Colossi disruptor play. I don't know if any of you guys remember that, but if you go back to 2016 BlizzCon, we had Showtime going Colossi, adding just a few disruptors because those Novas just ready in the back of your army to throw out into a mass of units, and then adding Storm. So he wasn't committing to a lot of disruptors, but a few of them for utility. Showtime did his every type of splash build. I talked to him about it. We did like a show about it and stuff. I did a Pig Daily episode on it. Yeah. So those sort of builds, it's a super high impact unit that can absolutely change games. It's just not going to be as central. Virtually unused versus Zerg, says Voka Bindial. 2016 it wasn't. Against lurker styles, it is amazing. So there's people in chat saying, no, it's a nerf, it's bad versus Zerg. The current one is bad versus Zerg because any Zerglings in front, the disruptor shot just goes, and it even if someone's going Roach Hydra Lurker, they can easily mix in a wave of Zerglings and they just cock block your disruptor shot and you friendly fire yourself and your balls are just useless, right? Zerglings are like the chastity belt for the current disruptor, guys. Okay? So we don't need to look at this one in terms of nerf or buff. We just need to look at this as it's different. It's a redesign. I like what Jen Swift's saying. But what you can do now is you can just go straight through those Zerglings and you will fuck up Roach into Hydra Lurker styles with this. And Roach Hydra into Lurker is very common at the moment, guys. This is a very common style. So this is gonna give a lot more power. This is also something which will allow you to go Colossi against Hydraling Bane, because adding a few disruptors in against a heavy Hydra force, heavy Baneling force is massive. Colossi not as good at clearing up the Banelings and the Hydras. They're good at clearing the Zerglings, but if they get flanked, they get screwed. The disruptors will add a bit more power there. So I like this disruptor a lot. I can't wait to play with it again. I like the current disruptor, but I'm just happy to get a different type of disruptor. It'll be fun. It'll be really fun. And here we have, yet another insane buff for Protoss, guys. Now, this is one people have glimpsed over. I think it was Reddit who said, oh, lol, the Tempest still not going to get built. Like, I'm not sure if it was a Reddit comment that was at the top of the Reddit thread when this was first announced. Maybe it was a different change. There was one change, someone said that, and it had like 100 upvotes. And I was like, oh, you're so wrong. This is the most fucking amazing unit you guys have ever seen. I played these against Jason. Oh my God. It's only one game. They are so maneuverable. So they're cheaper now, so they're more accessible. They cost one less supply while still doing the same damage. And let's face it, Tempest were never meant to be getting hit. They were always meant to be in the back lines. Most important, okay, they're a bit more fragile. Oh my God, they're way weaker. But Tempests are never meant to be in combat. They're meant to be behind combat in the first place. Here's the big one. The speed is increased by like almost 50%. That is fucking huge. And the acceleration is doubled. I was microing these bad boys and Stimmed Bio was struggling to catch up them. I was like, oh fuck, I don't have a high Templar covering my Tempest. I would like run back. The Marines are like trying to catch up. And then I get back full screen before the Marines caught my Tempest and I stormed the shit out of them. Like, these things are quick. And of course they made a terrible GIF to show it off. This does not show off the change at all, which is why a lot of people didn't realize how huge this is. Vocabindial says, I don't want to be a negative Nancy. Most Protoss streamers are calling these nerfs. What are you talking about? Link me some clips, Vocabindial. I'm not going to get sidetracked to that conversation anymore because it's just objectively wrong. These are massive buffs to the Tempests. Massive. This video does not show the fact that the Tempests are moving and shooting so smoothly. It's with Micro, the new Tempest is the most godlike unit in the game. What you'll find, Vocabindial, most Protoss streamers have not played the test map, or they've played like 2 games. They haven't read through the fucking changes. And that's why they're just talking from what their first impressions were without actually playing with it. Why have I taken 3 weeks to do this video? Because I've actually played with the changes. I've thought about them. I haven't thought about them super deeply. I could be wrong on some of these things. But the consensus that Protoss is getting nerfed is so completely wrong that I needed to make this video, and that needed to be at least one point I touch on here. I'm going to stop ranting about that now because we are about to come to a big nerf. And if you're someone who turtles and plays carriers every game, don't get me wrong, you're fucked. You've got a good reason to complain, turtle carrier players. Carriers are changing drastically, and this is the one unit I haven't had a chance to play with yet. These are meant to be a lot worse, is my impression. I've got to play with them to figure it out. Once again, back with the feedback change, how many of your games are decided at the carrier stage? I would argue not many of you had. There is a minority of Protoss players who play carriers every game off the back of cannons, and right now in this state, this is nerfed. Keep in mind, this is a test map. We are testing for 2 more months before this goes live, or a month and a half, because they like to exaggerate changes, see how it plays out, and then they adjust it and they tone it back. Now, the big problem with the carrier change is they've removed Graviton Catapult. And that means interceptors launch very slowly. And in big late game fights, we all know how StarCraft 2 late game fights go. You're like, cool, my interceptors are launching. We've got 3 out of each carrier. We've got 4 out. 4 carriers are dead by the time you've launched all your interceptors. Corruptors are just like fucking one-shotting them and shit. Like, it's just a bit slow. On the other hand, their buffer extra 50 hit points is very nice. It's very nice. Build time is decreased drastically, 22 seconds. They're much more accessible. You can get them earlier. Interceptor build time increased drastically, so you can't rebuild your interceptors as quickly. I like that change a lot. The Graviton Catapult is the one which is going to be problematic, and I think they're going to need to come to a middle ground. But allowing it, you guys know when you kill all the interceptors and then you push in and the carriers just fly back, and by the time you get through the wall, all the interceptors have rebuilt. That always, to me, felt really silly and a bit bullshit. The carriers could kind of like lose a fight, pull back, and then like 40 seconds later be refilled for next to no minerals, and then win the second fight. That's a good change. I like that direction. Intercepted damage decreased from 5 times 2 to 8 times 1. That's an interesting change. Now, this is one this is one which is quite it's big. It's a big nerf against some units, and it's a big buff against others. This makes him way better against things like Corruptors, which would have double armor would have these has 2 base armor. Battle cruisers, Corruptors will go down faster, but against like Hydras, Marines, a lot of these units they're commonly fighting, they're going to do less damage with a single attack, right? Rather than doing 10 damage a shot, they're doing 8, right? So let's imagine though. Now, so that's a 0 armor unupgraded Hydralisk, right? You're doing 10 damage a volley or 8 damage a volley. Okay, you're a bit worse versus Hydras. What about versus Corruptors? Let's just do the maths, because I haven't really thought through these numbers. I actually thought they were going to give a few more interceptors to the carriers. I thought they were going to increase the capacity to 10. Apparently not. Apparently that's not something they were going to go through with. I thought they were doing that as well. Anyway, so you're doing 5 times 2. If there's 2 armor on each, you're doing 6 damage a shot to a Corruptor as opposed to 6 damage a shot. So it's the same versus Corruptors. Ooh, okay, so it's the same versus heavily armored units, but it's a lot weaker versus Hydras. That combined with Graviton Catapult, that's too big, right? And the upgrade, that just means if it's the same overall damage increase from your upgrade. So I think the combination of this and this, yeah, carriers are in Poop City with that. I will try and play them some games. I'll test them out. I'll let you guys know how they go with the ability to get the carrier count up quicker. That could change things more than we realize. I don't think it'll make up for the lack of this and this, though. Lowered damage, lowered Graviton Catapult. I think they're going to have to tone that one back. We'll see where it goes. I think no matter what, we can see the direction of this one here, though. Interceptor build time increased from 6 to 11 seconds. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Amazing. Oh, this is the one everyone said was useless. This is going to be game-breaking in 1 in 1,000 games. Like, this is going to just win games. Time Warp has changed, guys. It not only reduces the movement speed by 50%, which is huge, it also reduces their attack speed by 50%, and it's a fat AoE. You cannot engage in that Time Warp. That is a crazy zoning out ability. It is insane. You will not be able to fight in that Time Warp. Don't get me wrong. You're usually not going to get the Time Warp in a good position to use it. This is going to be like maybe not 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100 games. You're going to be like, fuck yeah, Time Warp, and you're going to land it. They're going to have to just run away from the Time Warp. It's going to be so sick. It's going to be really, really cool. It's really, really cool. So they've made Time Warp be something people remember to use now, because you land that on an army, it's huge. You thought they fired slower? No, it was only movement slower. It's only, it used to just be 50% movement. Now it's 50% attack speed. That's huge. That's a big change. You recall in their base and use Time Warp, says Florencio. Shield Battery will now heal units that Phoenixes are lifting. Good, good, good. Assimilator, the change that should have happened years ago. So if you look at a refinery or an extractor, they have 500 hit points. Yet for some reason, assimilators have had 900 hit points, and the number of games Protoss players have won in base trades because their assimilators have extra life, because in the Wings of Liberty beta or like early days of 2010, Marauders kept sniping assimilators, Marauder drops, and Protoss didn't have enough gas, so they couldn't get out their important units, so they had to buff the assimilator and the Nexus hit point. I'm pretty sure the Nexus hit points went up as well simultaneously, and then they never changed it back. And the number of times you've got a few it was Reapers. Sorry, it was Reapers. It was the old Reaper used to have a 30 damage ability. So it was the Marauders that got the Nexus increased, I'm pretty sure. That was a different one. So yeah, Reapers used to do 30 damage a shot to buildings. So you'd jump in with 3-Rax Reaper, you'd just like kill an assimilator, you'd kill a Nexus. It was really dumb. It was a terrible state of balance. The game is very different now. They're finally bringing that assimilator down. Anyone who's complaining about that nerf is whack. You're crazy. They're even making warp gates automatically transform. Gateways automatically transform to warp gates, which is terrible for Florencio because he doesn't like the warp gate upgrade. But for everyone else, this is just like, well, let's make Protoss even lazier. I don't... I bother hotkeying my gateways, tabbing to them, and transferring them to gateways. I've learnt that mechanic as an elitist who's actually gotten better at StarCraft, forced myself to get better at StarCraft and learn good habits. I am outraged. First, the fact that I hotkey my High Templar separately and keep them behind the battle rather than A-moving them to their death with F2 A-move. They went and gave the High Templar an auto attack to stop that happening. Now they're making warp gates auto research. What have I even bothered practicing for? I don't actually care about this change. I don't give a shit. You can. This is a quality of life change. It's like, it's not going to change pro play at all. It's going to help casuals. I don't give a shit. It's fine. It's fine. We can help casuals. I'm totally fine with that. Doesn't really change that much as the elitist part of my brain is like, why do we need that? Just learn how to play the game. I understand why we want to make the game friendlier to casuals. Not everyone plays the game all day like me. Fair enough. New countdown timer added to the start of matches. This is the best thing ever, guys. So they're going to make it so when you queue up a match and you get in there, you load into the map, you see where you've spawned, and it's going to go 3, 2, 1, and then you start. Oh, this is like the streamer change. We've been asking for this for a long time because you're always there talking to chat, you're alt-tabbed, looking at some pictures of Bowsette or some shit, going, what the fuck is this thing the internet's created? Then you're like, oh shit, I'm in game, and the game's already started, and you're a few seconds late on putting your pylon down, and you're checking your opponent's race. You realize your pylon's meant to be at the front to wall off versus Zerg, and it's not in position, and you're like, fuck! I don't know if it's 3 seconds or 10 seconds. I like it because it allows you to look away from your computer, especially for high-level players when you have a 5-minute countdown. That's going to help. That's going to help a lot. So you said, look, they're like, look, these changes are all balanced towards being more noticeable. So they're saying the changes are bigger, but we'll tone them down or remove them as we go. Good luck testing. Now, there's a few changes to finish up, guys. A few days ago, they released another... Welcome to the Pigsty, Dandra. Thanks for the tier 1 sub. They've released another little thing here. They said, look, here's a few changes. Shield batteries are going to lose 50 shields, 50 hit points. That's scary because Protoss already kind of are on a knife's edge without the mothership core against Zerg Olins, especially, even against some Protoss and Terran Olins. This is something people are like, oh, dude, being able to 5-shot shield batteries, that's crazy. Now, obviously, this is targeted especially at people building offensive shield batteries outside the Terran base, outside the Zerg base. So this is a 100% nerf, and I get people complaining about this one because there's a good reason. On the defense, this really hurts. It's meant to try and damage these immortal cannon shield battery busts, these void ray busts, right? But it may be a bit too strong on the defensive side. I think there's this weird spot where shield battery rushes are not a problem at pro level, but they are very hard to deal with, and they're very frustrating to play against at low, middle, and even any level that's not pro play. People struggle against shield battery rushes, right? So it's one of these things where I think as Blizzard, you've got to weaken that shield battery rush somehow to appease the community and to make people not get rage quitty and fucking lose their minds. They're like, not only do I get cannoned, but it's followed up by shield batteries, and it's like this 2-staged rage machine. People are struggling against it. People are frustrated. They want to find a way to nerf it. I understand where they're coming from, but I agree with the Reddit feedback on this change. This may be too big a nerf. As I said earlier, there are nerfs, there are buffs. We can be mad about some things, happy about other things. I'm simply... The whole saying, look, Protoss isn't really getting nerfed overall was very much me pointing out that the hive mind was out for blood and saying, Protoss is getting so nerfed, this is all terrible. And I don't think that many people actually read through the changes and thought about what they meant, because there's a lot of really good things in here for Protoss as well. Now, the Warp Prism pickup range is going down by 1. I'm totally okay with that. It's a little bit broken when I'm just picking up and dropping Immortals. I'm going to have to be a bit more careful with my Archon drop. I'm still going to Archon drop all the time. It's not going to change what I do. It's just going to make it a little bit easier to snipe down. The one problem I have is that Queen range is so far, so part of me wants the Queen range to kind of revert back down by 1. Because I want Banshees and Oracles and stuff to be really good. We got a couple of interesting people in chat who apparently don't know how to listen to words. And like, shield batteries enough. Shield batteries enough. I'm like, that's what I'm saying. There's a slight delay. I'll imagine the angry Protoss people in chat are who want something to whine about to excuse themselves from why they're losing on ladder. Will probably complaining before I agree that is a nerf. Now this is a good change because I love my Chad rays, and the 40% movement speed decrease when they turn on their thick piss beam was way too slow. They're reducing that to 25%. I would like it to be reduced even more because I want to go back to doing my Void Ray opening, Oracle Void Ray against Terran into Colossi. It's so fun to shoot down drops with Void Rays. There is nothing more satisfying than catching a medevac with a Void Ray. I don't think you'll be able to do it anymore. You could barely do it even without the speed decrease. We'll see how it goes. This will make the Void Rays a little bit more maneuverable. I like it. It's a good little buff there. Oh my god, guys. Here comes the big one. Transfuse is going to get nerfed a little bit. It's still a really fucking good spell. That's my only thoughts on this. So Transfusion will no longer instantly heal 125 health. Instead, it will instantly heal 75 life, and then it'll heal the next 50 life over 7.14 seconds. So in the middle of combat, units will just, like Ultras, Broodlords, are going to not get just, you're on full life, you're on full life, you're on full life. And there's like 8 Vikings shooting a Broodlord and it doesn't die for 30 seconds. It's a good change. It's going to tone down a spell which was really silly. Bringing Queens across the map with Broodlord pushes never sat right with me. I always felt like it was a bit too strong. It's just this weird thing where like you combo these units and it feels a bit, ugh. So as someone who, you know, I played a lot of Zerg, I'm very happy for that to get nerfed. Creep. The creep generation time. So the time between creep growth periods is increased from 0.3 to 0.45. So that basically is just slowing down the creep significantly, which is awesome. Also, Overlord's generating creep will be slower. So when you start pooping on a base, it won't just instantly block the entire base. You can kill the Overlord, put your Nexus or your command center down pretty quickly. Good changes, just toning back creep a little bit. I still think creep should have its vision reduced or just remove some of the movement boost on it. Because I think like just the fact that it gives you vision everywhere and stuff is like already very powerful. The problem with Zerg and Legacy of the Void, and this is why we see periods where people are like, Zerg's so weak, and then periods like, Zerg's so fucking broken, is because if Zerg gets a certain lead, they run away with the game a bit too much because of the creep mechanic. At very high levels especially, it's like, my pressure didn't quite do the damage I want. Okay, here's my next pressure. There's creep outside my base, and there's just creep everywhere. There's no way to surprise the Zerg player with positioning and with good tricky maneuvers. Creep shutting out comeback mechanics is bullshit, and it shouldn't happen because it makes games more boring. And this is why if the Zerg gets a certain amount ahead, they very rarely lose anymore. We don't see as many Zerg throws, especially not from the top end players. So just toning creep back a little bit is something which I think should allow some more comebacks against Zerg. It's still going to be a very good mechanic. This is only really going to hurt the people that are insanely on top of spreading their creep, because most people aren't spreading creep as fast as they can anyway. So what you're going to find is I think this is actually a very marginal increase, a marginal nerf, unless you're Serral. So this is like a Serral Scarlet nerf. If you're not a top pro gamer, I doubt this changes your creep spread at all because you're too busy injecting and building other things. So this is actually targeted at the top end of play, which is interesting. It's a Scarlet Serral nerf incoming. Next up, Tunneling Claws is going to be cheaper, which is cool, make it a bit more accessible. Most importantly, so Serral can't just kill everyone with Tunneling Claw Roaches every game. The problem was Roaches so basically they're making the health regen while burrowed half. It's 7 hit points a second rather than 14. The problem before was you could send 5 Roaches to try to, with an Overseer, to deal with 3 Roaches, and those Roaches could just burrow, move around the base, and unless you put a crazy amount of APM into stutter stepping and focus firing, you would never kill those 3 Roaches. They just waddle around healing. So what Serral always does is he burrows Roaches into 2 bases, runs them around. The opponent has to send double the number of Roaches to deal with those, and he hits the front at the same time. Because he's hitting the front, they have to micro there. They never end up killing the Roaches. The Roaches pop up, kill a few drones, go under, and they just keep doing that while he just keeps hitting the front, and he wins every game with it. It's hard to do, but it was a little bit broken. They're going to make this a very ZVZ focus change. It's just going to be easier to kill those bullshit Tunneling Claw Roaches. I like it. I like it a lot. So that Hydralisk change where they were going to reduce the life, they reverted that immediately back up to 90 life. They said, you know what? It's already a fragile unit. This doesn't change anything. The feedback they got from pros and all players was like, no, that's a silly change. Like, it's still a fragile unit. 5 hit points doesn't matter. But instead, they've reduced the damage by about the same margin, like 5%. 5% attack speed. Someone can do the maths on that. I'm not good at maths. They're reducing their attack just a little bit. Cool. It's a small nerf to Hydras. I like it. Infestor unit radius is smaller. What that means is they're gonna be able to stack up a bit more. So when you're burrowed with them, or when you're standing there, they don't push as much of your army away. Often it's hard to get your infestors in range because they're too fat. This is going to allow you to get your infestors forward and throw your spells and not block your army as much, which is cool. The scale of their model is also going to get smaller to fit with that, so they're not going to look as big on the screen. That's nice. They can also now move through units while burrowed, so they're not going to have any collision size anymore. They can just move straight under units, which is cool. Fungal growth will no longer allow affected units to blink, tactical jump, or load into transport or buildings. So that's cool. So if you fungal a drop, they can't just pick up into the medevac and fly away, which with Roach Ravager Infestor styles, they could do before. It was what we call bullshit. Likewise, you'd fungal a bunch of Archons and a Prism. The Archons would just pick up the Prism and fly away. If you didn't have like 4 Queens already hitting the transport, it just wouldn't do anything. So it's going to make Infestors a little bit better at shutting down drops and high-tech units that want to use movement spells, as well as shutting down Blinkstalkers. That's cool. Overall, Infestor's still going to be a relatively niche unit, but the one thing can move through units while burrowed. If you guys are on the MMR and the NA ladder where you play against Vibe regularly, welcome to Fucktown. You are so screwed. He is going to murder any of us that build Thors or Battle Cruisers or Carriers. His Infestors are always going to get in range to Neural Parasite. I don't know if it'll matter at pro level because we don't see much Neural Parasite, but when I'm playing Vibe, I'm going to try and kill him before he gets Infestors because that shit is disgusting. He's already so good with Neural Parasite. Remember, you can cast it while burrowed at the moment, and they're keeping that. So with those Infestors being able to be right underneath his Hydras or Lurkers or whatever, he's going to be able to just steal your whole army. So Vibe's gross. He's gonna get a big buff from that. Vibe's very happy, I'm sure. We'll see if we see it in pro play. And as I said before, they're drastically reducing the cost of the Nidus Network by 100 gas and 50 minerals, down to 150, 150. And the exits are still going to be 50 minerals, 50 gas. So Nidus on the test map right now, super good, super cheap. Try it out, guys. It's really fun. And they just fixed a few bug issues. That's all. So guys, that was my overview. Let's go back to the thing which people were getting mad about. Protoss is nerfed. I agree the shield battery change could be really big because especially defending attacks. Shield batteries are huge. They're the important thing which is kind of made up for the lack of the mothership core. It could be too strong. I don't think the Warp Prism change is that bad. Yes, it's significant. It's going to stop you being quite as obnoxious with your Warp Prism. It's also going to stop... Like, I was watching PvP last night, Stats vs. Trap, and it's like, when you watch pro level, just like a Warp Prism, its ability to just fucking fly around a late game PvP battle and save every important unit, it's going to be slightly worse at doing that. Slightly. It's still going to be insanely good by just picking up your Archons when they're low on hit points, dropping and putting up your Immortals. Roaches still aren't going to be able to kill a player with good Warp Prism micro. If they're good with their pickup micro, you just keep dropping and picking up your Immortals and Archons. So you've still got this real power with the Prism. I don't think it's that big. This is a buff. As I said, there's a lot of other buffs. If you're not a carrier player, I think you've got absolutely no business complaining about, oh my god, the nerfs are so bad for my race. Protoss is so shit now. I think Protoss is actually looking quite good. I think that, like, for me as someone who used to love using the Tempests back when they were only 4 supply, these new Tempests are like insane. They're so good. They're so much more maneuverable. Check it out. Have fun with it because this shit is awesome. It's so cool, guys. I think all races are going to have a lot of fun. If you are on the test map, don't get me wrong, there's not that much new stuff to play with as Zerg. With Terran, the battlecruisers are really good against Zerg. They're still not the best against Terran or Protoss. The problem with the battlecruiser, by the way, I forgot to mention this, in TVT, amazing unit as long as your opponent doesn't build Ravens. Ravens can just cockblock them with their interference matrix, and then your unit looks like a steaming piece of shit. So, battlecruiser, though, against Zerg, it's really good versus Hydras, guys. It's really good versus Queens and Drones now. The Yamato still one-shots all of the important Zerg units. I think it still one-shots Broodlords as well, and Corruptors. But it won't two-shot Ultralisks now. It still gets them deep in the red, though, so it's pretty cool. All right, guys, thank you very much for the support. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Got some more YouTube videos coming. It was about time I did this one. Next time there's a new balance update, they change a few things. I'll do another video keeping you guys up to date. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.